Muted.
Brothers, good evening. We'd like to welcome you to the second webinar, Understanding the Process We Will Employ. This is part 2 of the 3-part training series for the People Process Product for Phi Alpha's national grant. We will be, once again, introducing Brother Elvin Dowling, who will be the presenter for this series. Brother Dowling?
Good evening, Brother Lyle. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Outstanding. Thank you so very much. Would you like me to go ahead and begin?
Yes, please.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Brother Lyle, for introducing me, and good evening to the brothers that are on the line. For those of you all who I haven't had the opportunity or privilege of meeting, my name is Brother Elvin Dowling. I'm a 1994 initiate of the Gamma Iota chapter at Hampton University, and I have the privilege and opportunity of working with our executive director and our leadership team in the Go to High School, Go to College grant process. And so we're going to be discussing the second part of our training series, which is going to deal specifically with process. And by process, what we're talking about are our compliance processes, as well as the process for bringing in new individuals, new program participants into the grant process at the local level. And so that's what we mean by people, product, and process. Before we begin talking about the process component, I just want to give you all a quick overview of what we talked about on yesterday and the first part of our call, which dealt with people. As you know, our goal is to serve African American and Latino youths across the country between the ages of 6 and 13 years old in our, 6 and 17 years old in our Go to High School, Go to College initiative. President Barack Obama launched the My Brother's Keeper initiative as a part of doing what the nation can do to help staunch the school-to-prison pipeline. And so that was really the crux of what we discussed yesterday, particularly as it is related to the whole concept of evidence-based practices that we're going to employ to make sure that our own national program is successful. And so with that being said, I'm going to turn our attention to our discussion for this evening, which is understanding the process we will employ. And so I first want to talk about how we got to where we are right now. As most of you all know, President Barack Obama launched the My Brother's Keeper initiative about a year or so ago, and in doing so, President Obama really challenged the nation to make sure that we do something to address the issue of African American boys and our plight with regard to our boys. And in launching the My Brother's Keeper initiative, what he essentially said was, that's what My Brother's Keeper is all about. It's about helping more of our young people to stay on track, providing them the support they need to think more broadly about their future, and building on what works, when it works, in those critical, life-changing moments. And so that's what we're going to talk about. How do we employ a successful process that builds on those life-changing moments as we move to our next slide? And so tonight, brothers, we're going to be talking specifically about the process that we're going to employ with Go to High School, Go to College. And I'd like to talk just for a moment about the importance of graduating from high school. Of course, as you know, Go to High School, Go to College is designed to make sure that our young people not only succeed at the elementary and middle school levels, but that they are prepared to go to high school in a means that is going to get them ready and on trajectory to move and transition into college. And so that's what the purpose of our program, as you already know, is all about. So we're going to move on to the next screen, if you would, Brother Lyle, if you click us on the next screen, and we're going to talk about the importance, brothers, of understanding where we are and what we need to do. And so I'd like to begin by giving you all essentially an overview of where we are from a national perspective, kind of give you a 30,000-foot view of where we are from a national perspective and the young people that we are going to be serving. And so first and most importantly, it's important that you know, brothers, that there are approximately 41 chapters throughout the country that will be engaging in go to high school, go to college at the local level. And so if you're on this training tonight, it's because your chapter has been selected as a part of this process. And so we're excited about the work that you're going to be doing, and we're looking forward to making sure that that work is substantive, making sure that that work is structured, and making sure that it's designed in a way that has maximum impact for our young people. And so let's talk about the chapters that have been selected to do this project. We currently have 36 alumni chapters and 5 college chapters across the country that have been selected to participate in Go to High School, Go to College. Of those 41 chapters, we're going to be serving 1,089 students through this grant project. But it's also important to note, brothers, that we're going to be, although we're going to be serving almost 1,100 students directly, we're also going to be serving about 45,000 young people indirectly all across the country. And so that's what we're really focusing on from an indirect perspective as well as a direct perspective. What are we doing to really organize and prepare our young people to face the challenges of the future? Next slide. I'm going to ask Brother Lyle if he's controlling our slides here, if he will move on to the next slide, where we're going to talk about, just for a moment, brothers, as we transition this slide process, we're going to talk about who is responsible at the federal level, at the corporate level, and at the local level for administering this program. So when we talk about processes, it's important to note that this process is only going to be successful when we determine who is responsible for making sure that this works. And so at the top, of course, we have the federal level, and our grant is a grant that is led to Phi Alpha by the United States Department of Justice's Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And so OJJDP, as it's known, they are the grantors for the grant that we have received. At the corporate level, we have our executive director, Brother William Lyle, who is really leading our efforts to make sure that we're successful in this. And we're also in the process of searching for, through a national search process, a program director that's going to be the administrator on a day-to-day basis to make sure that this grant is successful. Then we have, at the local level, the chapter president and the program coordinator. And I really want to emphasize for a moment that the chapter president really has to be engaged in this process. Not just the director of educational activities or whomever the Go to High School, Go to College coordinator is going to be. There has to be some sort of administrative and supervisory function that is provided by the chapter president in order to make sure that the program is successful. So in a nutshell, those are the individuals that are directly responsible for ensuring the success of this program. So as we move to the next slide, I want to kind of show you an organizational chart, if you will, so that you have a visual to understand how this all lays out. As you see in the slide, at the top of the slide, we've got the United States Department of Justice that is in control of the granting dollars, and then of course they've put those dollars out to us through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Just as a side note, our assigned grant manager is a very experienced grant manager that has been working with OJJDP for over 20 years. We've had the opportunity to really engage her in this process. Her name is Sherry Cantillon, and her role is really to help us understand DOJ's process. While the chapters at our local level are going through and have gone through an RFP process of their own, the fraternity has had some obstacles that we've had to, and some hoops that we've had to jump through as well. And so we've been working with the Department of Justice over the last couple of months in ensuring that all of the documentation that we need to have presented is completed. As you know, we had to revise our budget because our initial request was for $5 million, DOJ grant $1 million. So there had to be budget revisions along with revisions of our program narrative. There were a number of special conditions that the fraternity had to make sure that we met before we could actually go to funding. We are now at a point where we can actually begin drawing down on funding. There's just one other office we've got to get final clearance from, which is the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, and we anticipate having a final disposition back from them by the end of the week. So we're really at a point where we can begin drawing down on funds. And so after the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, of course, we have Phi Alpha, which is the grantee. This process is being led by our Executive Director, Brother William Lyle, and then under the Phi Alpha umbrella are the sub-awardees. And you, brothers, and the chapters you represent, you're the sub-awardees in this process. And so that is kind of a 30,000 look at the organizational structure of what we're going to be doing as we move on to the next slide. And so as we transition, brothers, I want to talk just for a moment about instructions that all of the chapters have received as a part of this grant process. As I mentioned earlier in the call, everyone has gone through a request for proposal process. And we want to, first and most importantly, thank you for the time and the diligence that each of you, each chapter put into developing its proposals. The committee had an opportunity to look at all of the proposals, and we had the privilege of actually approving all of the requests that came in for funding through this initiative. So we're really excited about the fact that no chapter was turned away, and we're happy that we're able to provide these resources to all the chapters that want to participate. Be that as it may, there are still a number of things that the chapter has to do, number of considerations that the chapter has to meet in order to fully accept the award. And so I'm going to go through those award instructions, and all of you by now have received an award notification package which includes these instructions. I would encourage you to print those instructions out, keep them handy, use them as often as you can, because there are things that you're going to need to do in order to remain in compliance with our project. So our first instruction is this. This grant is awarded on the condition that all requirements for program participation are met prior to the start of the grant period. These requirements must be met, and the project must begin on or before January 15, 2016, with program funding beginning February 1st, 2016. And so let's talk just for a moment, brothers, about the requirements that we are expecting that the chapters adhere to. We're expecting that the chapters make sure that every single mentor that is a part of your program submits a mentor application. Most of you have already done that. In fact, your applications were not considered complete unless you submitted at least 7 mentors as a part of your package. If, for whatever reason, there are a couple of mentors that you have not submitted to us, I would highly encourage you to get those names and those applications back to our office, and you can send those to the Go to High School, Go to College email address, and most of you should have that on file, but that email address is GTHSGT-grant@apa1906.net. Again, that email address is G as in George, HSGC-grant@apa1906.net. And so, brothers, we want you to make sure that you do the things that we require of you to do in order to stay compliant with the process. Make sure you submit your mentor application. Make sure that they're complete. Alpha Phi Alpha is going to undertake the process of screening and clearing through background checks all of the mentors that you submit to us. But we need to make sure we have that those documents in place. And so those are the things that we mean when we say make sure you're in compliance with everything that we've asked you to present to us prior to the beginning of the start of funding. The next instruction I want to talk about is the concept of monthly project progress report due on the 5th of every month. Every single month, there are going to be some critical things that we're going to need you to report back to us. First and most important thing from a mentor perspective that we're going to need you to report back to us are your mentor hours. And I want to emphasize again, the question was asked during the first training, what are going to be the metrics by which the chapters are measured for success? One of the first and most important metrics is that every single mentor chapter commit to mentoring at least 1 hour a month per child. And so if there's one mentor attached to one child, that mentor is responsible for mentoring that child at least 1 hour a month. If there's one mentor attached to 4 children, that mentor is responsible for mentoring that child, that one child at least 1 hour a month. And so those are the requirements. Those are the things that we're going to be looking for you to report back to us. I'm pleased to report to you, brothers, that we are in the process of developing a proprietary web-based application that will make reporting very, very easy. You should be able to do it through your iPad, your iPhone, all of these forms of technology that you currently use. You'll be able to submit these reports dynamically just through your phone or through your iPad. And so we're building that as we speak, and we're doing it because we want to make this progress as seamless as possible. We want to make this process as easy as we can from a reporting perspective. But we are going to ask that you report to us as often as possible, at least once a month. And then the other part of what we wanted to talk about is this whole concept of 10% of the total award being retained until all reports have been received and accepted. A number of you have asked that question. You've sent in queries via email and on these calls about what happens with that 10%. Essentially, brothers, what will happen is this. If you're a chapter, and I'm just going to use the number $10,000, if your chapter was awarded $10,000 as a part of this grant process, then you will be able to spend up to $9,000. If all of your receipts are turned in, if all of your reports are turned in, then you'll be able to spend up to $9,000. When we get to that 10% threshold, when 10% of the funds that you have been granted are left, the fraternity wants to ensure that all of the reports that you are supposed to turn in, all of the documents that are supposed to be turned in, we have all of that material, all of that information prior to releasing that final 10%. And so that's where that 10% of the funds being retained comes from. And we want everyone to have a fundamental understanding of what will happen in that process. So as we move to the next slide, I want to talk about this whole concept, brothers, of what we need to do in terms of making sure that we're prepared from a compliance perspective in terms of being responsible. But before we get into compliance, I want to talk about receipt of the award. Upon receipt of an award acceptance letter, and I have received a number of your emails who said, Brother Dallin, we haven't seen this award acceptance letter. You will receive an award acceptance letter by the end of the week. It will be coming to both the local program coordinator as well as the chapter president. Once you receive that award acceptance letter, your responsibility is to make sure that that acceptance letter is appropriately signed and sent back to the corporate office so that we can maintain it on file. What you're going to be signing is not just accepting the award, but also accepting the special conditions that come with the award. And those special conditions being that you've got to report, for example, all of the volunteer hours that the mentors are doing, that you've got to report all of the volunteer hours that the student participants are doing. So there are certain things that we're going to be looking for you to commit to do as a part of accepting the award. And so we want you to keep an eye out for that award acceptance letter. It will be coming to you in the next 48 hours. You will have a week in which to get those letters reviewed, signed, and sent back in to the email address that we mentioned earlier. And that email address, I just want to point out, brothers, make sure that all communications, even if you send the communication directly to either myself or Brother Lyle or someone else on the leadership team, make sure you always CC that email address so we can have a contemporaneous record of any issues that you might have or anything that you might be inquiring about when it comes to this grant process. And so those are essentially the instructions for the award that you have received. We're going to be looking to make sure that every single chapter accepts the award and follows the instructions in the award acceptance letter. And so the question was asked, well, after we get our award acceptance letter, if we don't sign and accept it in a timely fashion, what happens? And what happens is essentially your funds will be reverted back to the general organization, and we will then put those dollars back into the pool to be used in other means. So it is very important that you do not miss this step. You will get an award acceptance letter within the next 48 hours. It's going to be critically important that you sign that letter and send it back in the time frame prescribed, because if you do not do that, then we will presume that you've gone through the training, you've listened, you've learned, and you decided that this isn't for you, and that's okay. But we don't want to take away any funds from any chapter because of failure to respond in a timely fashion. And so we're going to ask you to be cognizant of those dates. And so as we move from award acceptance into this whole concept of grant compliance, I'd like to talk to you just for a moment about what we mean by grant compliance and what are going to be some of the expectations from a grant compliance perspective, and what are some of our objectives when we talk about grant compliance. First and most importantly, our goal is to ensure continued progress on current and future DOJ-supported grant-related mentoring activities while minimizing the risk to federal dollars and maximizing the fraternity's opportunity to secure additional funding. In layman's terms, brothers, we want to get some more money. And so the best way for us to do that is to be compliant with what the Department of Justice requires of us and to be compliant with what Phi Alpha is requiring of us. The second part of our objective is to, the fraternity has assembled a team of organizational, financial, and grant management experts to assist participating chapters with grant compliance and management-related issues. As I mentioned at the top, we have our executive director, Brother William Lyle, who's our organizational management expert who can really kind of guide us in terms of how we should be organizing at the local chapter level to make sure that we have all of the policies, all of the procedures, and all of the processes in place to make sure that we're successful. And then, of course, we have our financial management expert, which is Brother Stephen Sims, who is the immediate past national comptroller for Phi Alpha. And so Brother Sims has accepted the call at the request of the General President to serve as our compliance officer. And in doing so, Brother Sims' role is essentially going to be to make sure that we dot all of our I's and cross all of our T's, that the funds that we allot to the chapters are being spent in a timely, in a reasonable, and in a lawful fashion. And so our job from a compliance perspective is to assist you and to educate you to make sure that you know what you can do and what you can't do when it comes to spending those grant dollars. And then finally, of course, there's myself, Brother Elvin Dowling, as a grant management consultant. I will be working with the fraternity to make sure that we are clicking on all cylinders. There's a lot of moving parts, brothers, that are going on behind the scenes, and a lot of work that continues to be done with both the Department of Justice, with all of the local chapters. And so my role heretofore has been making sure that all of those trains run on time and that we make sure that we don't miss anything. And so with the combination of those three individuals that I mentioned, and we're also, as I mentioned earlier, we're bringing on a national program director whose goal is going to be on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we're compliant, to make sure that the vision, mission, and objective of Go to High School, Go to College is being met both at the national, regional, and local levels. So with those individuals, Brother Lyle, Brother Sims, myself, and our soon-to-be-named program director, our goal is to help you to be compliant and to make sure you have the resources, information, and training you need so that we can continue to be successful in this process. And so as we move to the next slide, I want to talk about the fact, brothers, that compliance really begins at the local level. And by that, what I mean is each participating chapter must be in good standing with the fraternity while participating in this grant opportunity, as well as in compliance with all mandated federal requirements. What does that mean? That means that first and most importantly, if you're on this call and your chapter has got a grant, then clearly you are in good standing and in compliance with Alpha Phi Alpha. We want you to remain that way. If for whatever reason your chapter falls out of compliance and out of good standing with Alpha Phi Alpha, then that will have a direct impact on grant dollars that you receive. So it is going to be critically important to make sure the chapter remains in good standing at the regional and the national levels so that we don't have any interruption of funding of your grant dollars. Second thing I want to talk about when we talk about this concept of compliance beginning at the local level, I want to say that when you have a policy or procedural question, I want you to start with the Mentoring Policy and Procedure Manual. Every single chapter that has responded successfully to the request for proposal process, you initially received a Mentoring Policy and Procedure Manual. Just to give you some background on that Mentoring Policy and Procedure Manual, that is essentially the same policy and procedure manual that is used by most of the major mentoring organizations across the country, whether it's Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America or 100 Black Men of America. The Mentoring Policy and Procedure Manual that was adopted by Alpha Phi Alpha and that has been customized by your chapter was developed in consultation with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And so all of the policies and procedures that are in this manual are directly reflective of what the U.S. Department of Justice wants us to do. The policies and procedures they want us to make sure that we implement on a regular, timely, and consistent basis. So if there's ever a question, brothers, about what is our recruiting policy, what's our policy for bringing in new mentors to this process, consult your Mentoring Policy Manual. When you have questions about what is the screening policy, last night we went through the 12 best evidence-based practices. Screening is one of those practices. All of those things, evaluation is one of those practices. We even have a policy and procedure on closing of matches. Sometimes we realize, brothers, that for whatever reasons, matches may not work out. And when I talk about matches, I'm really talking about a match between a mentor, which is an adult over 18 years old. That adult most likely will be a member of the chapter, but it could be a member of your local community if the chapter has so chosen to reach out to other individuals to help them in this process. And the mentee, which is the student between the ages of 6 and 17 years old. So we want you to constantly go back to that manual. Any questions you have about any of the policies, we have a travel policy as a part of this manual, what you can and what you can't do if the chapter, for example, decides that it wants to take it to a leadership development institute that the region is hosting. There are travel policies that have to be adhered to. And so we want you to constantly consult that manual. Last night, I said that the Mentoring Policy and Procedure Manual should be your Go to High School, Go to College Bible. That is what you refer to over and over again when you need clarity, when you need information, when you need answers, when it comes to policies and procedures. And then the last thing we want to encourage you to do when we talk about the concept of compliance beginning at the local level is to read the notice of award that was sent out to you and any additional compliance requirements and instructions. Every single chapter has received documents, not just telling them that they're getting an award, but also documents laying out what the award procedures are, instructions concerning those awards. But we also sent you a document that talked about next steps. This training that you're participating in today, that's a part of the next step process. We also have a 3-day training that's going to take place in January. That's a part of the next step process. We're asking that chapters, and we'll get into a local intake process for students that are coming into your program. Those are all parts of the next step process that we consider requirements from a compliance perspective. And so we're going to ask you to be attentive to those requirements, to make sure that you pay close attention to what it is we're asking you to do, and to follow those requirements very closely. There are dates that we've outlined for you. Put them on your calendar now. There are times that we're going to need you all to focus and make sure that the parents are engaged. Make sure that you take a close look at what those compliance requirements are and govern yourself accordingly. So as we move to the next slide, brothers, I'd like to talk just for a moment about a few ground rules when it comes to the whole concept of what it is we're going to be looking at. The first thing when it comes to ground rules is, brothers, we want to remind you that grant awards are made to chapters only. I repeat, grant awards through Alpha Phi Alpha to the local chapter are made to the chapters only. They're not made to your education foundation. They're not made to your charitable organization. They're made to your chapter. And why is this important? This is important, brothers, because we want you to remember that at the end of the day, the chapter is accountable. The chapter is responsible for the dollars that Alpha Phi Alpha sends to chapter. Now, that does not mean that the program can't be run and operated by your local education foundation. That doesn't mean that it can't be run or operated by the local charity foundation that the chapter controls. However, at the end of the day, Alpha Phi Alpha is going to be going back to your chapter. So we just want to remind you and emphasize that the chapters are the sub-awardees and not an entity that is controlled by the chapter. The second ground rule we want you to remember is that by drawing funds from the Mentoring Opportunities for Youth grant funded by DOJ, sub-awardees agree to the terms and conditions of the grant award. So by accepting the grant and drawing down on funds, you all are essentially agreeing to the rules of engagement, these rules of engagement that we're talking about right now. We're talking about the forms that we need you to fill out, the reports that we want you to send in, and we're going to, again, make these as easy as possible. We want to facilitate and make it as seamless as possible in terms of reporting back to us, but you will have to report. It's as simple as clicking a button, but we want to know when you're mentoring young people. We want to know how many hours you're mentoring. Why is this important? Because we want to go back to the Department of Justice when they let these funds again in April of 2016, and they announced that they've got some more money. We want to be able to go back to DOJ and say, these are the number of hours that we have completed in the last quarter. These are the number of people that we have trained. These are the number of training hours we have. And these are the number of kids we're serving. And in addition to the number of kids we're serving, this is anecdotal evidence of why this program is working. We've got photos, we've got videos, we've got activities that can demonstrate that we're doing the work of mentoring young black boys in a real, meaningful, and significant way. And so those are essentially some of the ground rules that we want you to follow and make sure that you adhere to as a part of this process. So as we move past ground rules and start talking about some of the common contributors to compliance problems, I want to point out some of the things, brothers, that get people tripped up when it comes to working with federal funds, when it comes to being a sub-awardee or an awardee of a federal Department of Justice grant. At the end of the day, everybody on this call loves freedom, and we want to make sure that we all stay free. And so part of staying free and loving freedom is make sure we stay out of jail. Let's just be straight. And so we want to be above board. We're going to be transparent. We're going to be accountable. We're going to make sure that the funds we use are used decent and in order. And so with that, some of the common problems that we find from a compliance perspective, inadequate resources that the chapter may have. And so let's talk about inadequate resources a moment. We touched on this partially last night, and I just want to kind of circle the wagons again on this. Many of you have sent emails and queries saying, well, we had the dollars we received were not analogous with our budget that we submitted. And what we said to you was, we want you to do what you've always done. And that's always been the stance of the fraternity. We don't necessarily want you to recreate the wheel or start doing a bunch of new things, but we want to enhance what you're already doing with go to high school, go to college. And so the budgets should reflect what you're already doing, and the dollars that you receive as a part of this grant are really to help supplement and augment the things that you're already doing. And so we want to avoid this whole concept of inadequate resources. The second, one of the second things that's a contributor to compliance problems is a lack of understanding of roles and responsibilities of program staff. And by program staff, we're really talking about the local coordinators and to a smaller extent, the mentors. This is why training is so critically important. Yesterday evening, we talked about, as a part of the first part of this training, those top 12 evidence-based practices. And a part of those evidence-based practices is this concept of training. There will be consistent and continuous training. Training is going to be how we get better. Training is going to be how we develop a better program so that we can service the young people that we're servicing more effectively. And part of this training, an ongoing effort to make sure that you all understand the rules of engagement, what you can do and what you can't do with the funds, and what you can do and what you can't do as a part of this process and a part of this program. And so we're going to make sure that staff training is always available, always readily accessible, not just to those on the call, but anyone that may be joining this process as we move down the line. And with that, I also want to say that the training that you received tonight, as well as the training you received last night and the training you will receive tomorrow night, and all subsequent trainings will be recorded. We're going to record those trainings because we want to make them available. So as your program continues, you may have stragglers come into the midst, brothers who decide in January or February that they want to be part of the process and they want to go through and submit their application. You'll be able to have them dynamically watch these trainings, and when they click on a link, we will be able to determine whether or not that person stayed on and watched that training, how long they stayed on for. Tracking is going to be critically important to us. And so we want your mentors that for whatever reason may not be on the call tonight but need this training, because every single mentor that is a part of this process needs this training. It's a requirement from the Department of Justice, and it's a requirement from Phi Alpha. And so if there's a mentor, for example, that could not be here tonight, they may have had a class or some sort of previous engagement. When we send you this link to forward out to those individuals, we want to ask you to remind them and gently let them know that we will be tracking whether or not they watch this training, because we want to make sure that they have the information that they need to be successful. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that is to actually sit through the training and imbibe and listen to and really reflect upon the things that we're talking about. The next part of that I'd like to talk about is the establishment of roles and responsibilities when it comes to the training itself. Now, we've talked about, to some extent in the first part of our training on yesterday, roles and responsibilities, the roles and responsibilities at the national level and the roles and responsibilities at the local level. Brothers, we want to provide, and we have provided a detailed listing of responsibilities, including oversight responsibilities for every role. All of the roles in this process have some sort of oversight function. At the mentor level, your oversight responsibility is your mentee, and by that I mean this. We need you to make sure that not only is your mentee engaged in the program, that they're showing up for the trainings, that they're showing up for the activities that we're putting on for them, But we also, mentors, we need you to make sure that the parents are engaged in this process as well. Yesterday's training, we talked about the importance of parental engagement. That is so critically important. I can't stress enough how much more successful your local program will be if the parents are engaged in the beginning, in the process. We don't want parents just dropping their kids off. We want them engaged in what you're doing. We want them asking questions. We want you communicating with them on a regular, consistent, and timely basis. And so, mentors, your role is to serve as in an oversight capacity for your mentees as well as the parents. In terms of our local program coordinators, and some of them may be a go to high school, go to college local chairman. That individual may be the director of educational activities for the chapter. Whoever that local program coordinator is, your administrative function, your oversight role is to make sure that the mentors are fulfilling their responsibility. And so your job is to make sure that the mentors are submitting their mentor hours in a timely fashion, and that any type of an administrative function that should be taking place with regard to the mentors is completed in a timely fashion. So local program coordinators, you have a really important role in terms of making sure that this program is successful. Then over and above the local program coordinator is the regional coordinator, and the regional coordinator's oversight function essentially includes working with program coordinator, serving as an advocate for the local program coordinator. And so if there are specific needs that your chapter has, your city has, we want you to communicate that with your regional coordinator. If there are specific requests that you might have, if you're having challenges that you need addressed at the national level, we want you to take those challenges as well as the opportunities back to the regional coordinator so that we can make sure that we address those challenges, those opportunities in a timely fashion. The regional coordinator's role is to make sure that all of the resources you need are provided in a timely fashion. And then finally, from an oversight perspective, we have the program director whose job is to oversee the entire function from an administrative perspective in terms of the implementation of go to high school, go to college. And so that's an oversight role that everyone plays, so everybody's got a role to play in this process. The second thing in terms of establishing roles and responsibilities, I want to talk about the fact that communication is vitally essential. We want you all to foster working groups or discussion groups for program staff involved with grant and contract administration at the chapter, regional, and national level. And we've already seen some anecdotal evidence out in the field with regard to the chapters working together. And I just want to highlight, for example, the chapters in the Western region. There were a number of chapters in Los Angeles that actually banded together. They made sure that they did their proposals together. They developed their programs together. They developed their activities together. So they're working in a group-like fashion to make sure that all of the kids in Los Angeles that are part of this program are served in a consistent basis. And so we want to encourage that. We want to encourage if there are cities that have multiple chapters that have been funded. Another one that comes to a city that comes to mind that has had multiple chapters funded is Chicago. And so if you're in one of those cities that has had multiple chapters that are funded, it is helpful when you work together. We want you to share best practices on what you're doing, best practices when it comes to the policies and procedures that we're implementing. So it's important that you communicate not just with one another, but we also want you to communicate with us. We're going to provide some resources to make sure that communication is done in a timely and consistent fashion. And we want you to use those tools and resources to communicate with us. Pick up the phone and call us. And I will say that in the short time that we've been working on this, there certainly hasn't been a hesitation to pick up the phone and ask questions. And we want to encourage more of that. If you have a question, call us. If you have an inquiry, email us. We want to be as responsive as we can to the questions and issues that you have, because we want to make sure we get this right. Brothers, we can get this right. We can do it right, or we can do it over. And so our goal is to do it right the first time, but that involves communication, and communication is going to be essential to make sure that we're successful. And then finally, I want to say that we want to ensure that there's a connection between everything that's going on. And so we want to make sure that everybody is connected in a fashion that key information is shared. If there are policy changes and new developments, we want to make sure that those things are communicated consistently and effectively. That's why it's important to make sure that you stay connected, not just with your local chapter if you're a mentor. It's important that you stay connected on all levels. If you're a mentor, stay connected with what's going on with the program in your chapter. If you're a program coordinator, stay connected with your regional coordinator to make sure that the training that we're putting out on a monthly basis is received and disseminated at the local level. So connection is important, and we want to emphasize those connections. So, brothers, we also want to provide you with with the information, with the resources that you need in order to be successful in this process. And so let's talk about some of the other things we want to do. We want to provide you with links to related resource information, such as organizational requirements, policies and procedures, everything that you need. Most of you received on yesterday, and then you received again today, and an email with a list of resources that you can link to. We're not just sending you that for our health. Those are resources that we really need you to make sure, one, that you read. And I can't stress this enough. It's important to read. It's important to read the materials that we send to you. If we're going to encourage our young people to read, we've got to lead by example. So it's important that you read the documents that we send to you, and they were selected with a lot of thought and care because we believe that they're helpful to you administering your program. So make sure you link into those resources. We sent you a resource document earlier this evening that you'll have in your email if you haven't received it already. Make sure that you click on those links. One of the very important links that you're going to probably refer to on multiple occasions is the Office of Justice Programs Financial Guide. That financial guide tells you do's and don'ts, what you can spend money on, what you can't spend money on. And so it's important that you refer back to those links. And then finally, we want to say that, again, we have established a compliance officer position. Brother Stephen Sims, our former comptroller, is in that position. So Brother Sims is really going to work with us to make sure that we're compliant. Any issues, and let me just say this, we want to be as transparent and open as possible. And so, brothers, whether you are at the mentor level, whether you're at the local coordinator level, whether you're at the chapter president level, no one is immune from scrutiny. We're going to make sure that all of the funds that you received are audited in a timely fashion. Our goal is to have an unqualified audit at the end of the day. And so we want to make sure that we have systems in place in order to achieve that. And so let's talk just for a moment about management systems and why management systems are so important to the success of our programs. Brothers, first I want to say that sub-awardees are expected to have systems, policies, and procedures in place by which they manage funds and activities. Most of you already have systems. Every chapter we selected you on the basis that you're a high-performing, high-functioning chapter. And so we want you to continue to employ the systems that you have from a management and compliance perspective at the chapter level. Make sure you have those same systems in place when it comes to this grant. And by systems in place, we're really talking about checks and balances to make sure that no one person, for example, can approve or expend funds without having some sort of checks and balance system, that there's a verification system within your chapter, that more than one set of eyes sees invoices, approves invoices. Make sure that if you're getting a quote for services that are provided, that you get more than one quote, that we don't use sole source vendors, for example. If, for example, you want to purchase T-shirts for your young people as they're going on a travel expedition to historically black colleges, for example, that you make sure that you get more than one quote we're going to be looking at things like that to make sure that everything is done decent and in order and from a compliance perspective. And so, brothers, now I want to transition and talk about effective management systems and why that's important. When we talk about effective management systems, what we're really talking about is a clear delineation of roles and responsibilities. And we've talked about that ad nauseum already, so I'm not going to get into that. But I also want to talk about the importance of written policies and procedures. And let me just say this. For those of you all who may not have or may need access to, let us know, and we can send this as a part of our resources document tomorrow. Alpha Phi Alpha has a financial policies and procedures guide. So the fraternity has a policies and procedures guide when it comes to operating our finances. So if you all would like to have copies of that, I'm sure that we will be more than happy to make that available to you so that you can customize it and adopt it to your own chapter. But those policies and procedures are really designed to make sure that there is no malfeasance or anything of the sort. And what I wanted to say was, again, everybody's going to be held accountable. And so if there are any concerns whatsoever when it comes to the expenditure of these grant funds, we want you to let us know. If you think that the funds are not being used for the purposes for which they were intended, we want you to let us know so that we can continue to remain compliant. And at the end of the day, we're able to get some more money from DOJ. In terms of other effective management systems, training is important. Having internal controls is very important. And having effective oversight. We talked about, again, no one person should sign checks. As an example, there should be an effective oversight process, and information sharing is, again, so vitally important to making sure that we're successful. Next, we want to make sure, brothers, that we have systems that provide reliable and current information, and that we have management systems that are driven by policy, not process. And you know, just from a layman's perspective, you know, we don't want you to do something because you've been doing it that way for the last 50 years. We want you to do something because that's the policy of the fraternity, that's the policy of your chapter, because it follows internal controls that you've already established. So again, if your chapter has not established internal controls, let us know. We'll help you to develop policies and procedures. We'll give you access to the fraternity's own internal control policy so that you can adopt them at the local level. But those are critically important, brothers, in order to make sure that we're successful as a part of this process. So as we move to the next part, I want to talk about this whole concept of strengthening internal control systems and why strengthening internal control systems is important. First, brothers, management tools that we're going to provide for you are designed to help you achieve the results and safeguard the integrity of the process and the integrity of the program. The last thing we want is for Alpha Phi Alpha to be on the news because of financial malfeasance when it comes to a federal grant. And so we want to make sure that we safeguard the integrity, not just of Alpha Phi Alpha and our brand, the integrity of our chapter and the integrity of a program that's been around for almost 95 years, which is go to high school, go to college. We also want to promote efficiency and effectiveness, and we encourage compliance. Brothers, it is critically important. Compliance training isn't anything that's necessarily sexy. It's not anything that's fun, but it's necessary and it's important. And so we want to encourage compliance training. We want to, again, encourage every single local program coordinator, encourage every single mentor. And I know there are probably mentors on the phone who are thinking, well, I'm just mentoring a kid. Why do I need to know about compliance? Because compliance is everybody's job. And I want you to think about it like we do membership intake. Membership intake is all of our responsibility. Bringing somebody new into Alpha Phi Alpha is everybody's responsibility. We're making sure we protect the brand, the integrity, and these federal funds is also everyone's responsibility. So we want to encourage compliance. We want you as mentors to encourage compliance amongst the people that you supervise, i.e. the mentees. They've got to be compliant when it comes to making sure they had their hour a month to volunteer in the community. We want to encourage compliance at every single level of this program. Next thing I want to talk about is to ensure that internal controls are functioning as intended to achieve objectives. And so it's going to be important that the local chapter president, the presidents that are on the line, local chapter president, we want you from time to time to just check in on the program, to look at the books, to look at the expenditures, to look at the expense reports. In fact, all of the chapter presidents are going to have to sign off on expense reports. We're in the process, so you know, we're in the process of developing those reports that you'll be able to submit to us dynamically using that app that we're building. So we're going to have those tools available for you. We want to make sure that you use them. But chapter presidents, at the end of the day, you're the leader. The buck stops with you. And so we're going to ask that you remain vigilant and engaged in this process. And finally, we want you to perform your own risk assessment to focus on high-risk events. At the end of the day, we don't want anything untoward to happen with regard to our mentoring program. And so that is why we require that all activities have some level of supervision. All mentoring takes place in a recognized, safe place that has supervision for the mentees that we're working with. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where it's a risk not just to the brother and the mentee, but also a risk to the chapter and to Alpha Phi Alpha. And so we want you to focus on any events that you might think are high risk and mitigate those risks to as great an extent possible. And by now, we all have a really good foundational understanding, if we've been in Alpha Phi Alpha any time, of what risk management is. And so we want you to apply this whole concept of risk management that we think about from a membership intake perspective. We want you to apply that same thinking, that same logic when it comes to administering this grant. So as we move to the next slide, and we talk about this whole concept of internal controls, we want to give you some internal control activities that you all can engage in. Once again, making sure that you have written policies and procedures. Brothers, I can't stress enough, is it written in the policy? So let it be written, so let it be done. If it's not written, it doesn't exist. And so we want to encourage you to have your own written policies and procedures, particularly when it comes to internal controls and financial matters. Again, if you don't have those policies and procedures, if you want a copy of the fraternity's internal financial control policies and procedures so that you can customize it for your own local chapter, we can certainly make sure that you have access to that information so that you have written policies and procedures. A segregation of duties is also important. Approval and authorization of any expenses. No one person should be able to approve expenses. There should be a process that is involved, that requires approval and authorization from the local program coordinator as well as the chapter president. Documentation. Yes, sir?
Okay, brothers,
Yes.
we are back. Can you hear it?
I'm here, Brother Lau. I hope you can hear me okay now?
Yes, I can.
Outstanding. My apologies, brothers. I got disconnected, but before I got disconnected, we were talking about examples of internal control activities, and I just wanted to stress the importance again of monitoring and reporting. That's going to be so critically important in this process, and so we want you to remain engaged when it comes to monitoring and reporting the work that you do. So as we move on to the next part, I want to get into what are allowable expenses and what are not when it comes to what you can do concerning go to high school, go to college, and the dollars that we give to you. So let's talk just for a moment about allowable expenses. There is, as I mentioned as a part of this call, there's a OJP financial guide that I want you to make sure that you download. I sent it to you as a part of those references for tonight's call. But everything that we're talking about in terms of what you can and what you can't do, what is allowable and what is not, is a part of that OJP financial guide that I want you to familiarize yourself with. So in terms of allowable expenses, let's talk just for a moment about travel. Travel costs are allowable expenses by program participants who are in travel status on official program business. These costs must be in accordance with federal or organizationally approved travel policy. And so you can travel domestic primarily, and I don't necessarily foresee any travel foreign. So when it comes to domestic travel, recipients may follow their own established travel rate. However, the Office of the Comptroller reserves the right to determine the reasonableness of those rates. In other words, brothers, we want you to be reasonable when it comes to travel. Some of you may want to travel to various places with your young people, so we want you to just consult your travel policy as you book